Good morning and welcome to Redemption Community Church. We hope you had a great time celebrating Christmas with your family and friends. We're so glad that you've taken the time to worship with us online today. Our house churches will pick back up next Sunday, so if you'd like more information about joining a house church group, email Brandon at rccbelleville.com and we'll get you connected. We'll be working at the building again on Tuesday evening. If you're available, we'd love to see you there. Join us from 3 to 8 p.m. We'll be hanging drywall and working on things downstairs as we continue to put the building back together. This is a great way to connect and serve with each other as we continue to make great progress on our future church home. Today, we'll be wrapping up our Advent series and taking a look at joy. Again, we're glad that you're here with us. We hope you have a great time in worship today, and you have a wonderful week and a happy new year. We'll see you again next week.
Oh, hail the King, Emmanuel. need freedom, He's where you find it. Oh, if you need freedom, He's where you find it. He's where you find it.
Joy to the world, the Lord is come. Let earth receive her King. Let every heart prepare Him room, and heaven and nature sing, and heaven and nature sing, and heaven and heaven and nature sing. Joy to the world, the Savior reigns. Let men their songs employ, while fields and floods, rocks, hills and plains repeat the sounding joy, repeat the sounding joy, repeat the sounding joy. He rules the world with truth and grace, and makes the nations grow. The glories of His righteousness, and wonders of His love, and wonders of His love, and wonders of His love. All creatures of our God and King, lift up your voice and with us sing. Oh, praise Him. Oh, praise Him. Hallelujah. 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 Praise the Father, praise the Son, and praise the Spirit, three in one. Oh, praise Him. Oh, praise Him. Oh, hallelujah. 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 Yeah, yeah, yeah. Hallelujah. 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 Hallelujah.
Well, hey, Redemption family, thank you so much for joining us online. Hope you had a great holiday. You were able to get together maybe with some family and friends, or perhaps having a Zoom dinner. Either way, we hope that you got to make the most out of the Christmas we've been given. Well, as a church, we've been celebrating Advent. It's a yearly tradition for us here, and we are rounding the corner. Advent is almost over, and we will begin celebrating a new year. One of my yearly traditions is to carve out a small section of time on Christmas Day to actually just spend time being reflective and really being introspective and contemplative about this past year, about this holiday, and what it means to me. And so what I wanted to do this morning is honestly take a little bit of that and be vulnerable with you and share with you, and then hopefully allow that to frame up this last discussion we're going to have before we head into what is a brand new year. I know a lot of people are looking forward to 2021, but I want to make sure that we don't miss the opportunity we've been given to look back and to reflect and to even grow as a result of this past year. And so for me, what I do, and maybe you're like me, is I take just a small amount of time to kind of get by myself. And this year I was really thinking a lot about not just what this Christmas meant in particular, as it was different. Typically for us, my in-laws will travel in on the day after Christmas, and we'll celebrate and have some fun that way. But that is not the case this year. In fact, we did a Zoom dinner last night with the majority of my in-laws, Sarah's family, and it was nice. But it's, as you know, a poor substitute for the real thing. And so this Christmas looks different for everyone. We understand that. We're all in the same boat in that regard. But I was thinking a lot about the last 38, 39 Christmases that I've had. And I've thought about how each year I have this anticipation, I have this hope for what Christmas could be. And maybe you're that way. Maybe you're a bit more nostalgic or sentimental than most. And so you always kind of picture this notion. And so I've just spent time reflecting and thinking about that and being very excited and hopeful and in anticipation of next year and what that will afford us. Hopefully by then we've gotten back to normal and we've got exciting opportunities ahead of us to travel and spend time with family and friends and to hug some necks in a way that we haven't been able to do. And so one of the things I was reflecting over was just how radically different this year has been in relationship to previous years, and how really over the last 38, 39 years, while I've been idealistic about Christmas in some particular ways, one of the things is I've learned how I've taken Christmas for granted in many regards, how there's just this expectation that Christmas is going to be. And how oftentimes when we're talking to people about the holidays and we ask what the plans are, we will say things like, well, something we do every year, or this is how we've always kind of done it, or, I've been doing it this way since I was a kid. And so we really have an expectation of tradition, of kind of honoring that tradition, or this is just the way that our family functions, and so we've embraced that. That's not always true with regard to it being a good thing. Sometimes it's just, hey, our family is nuts and Christmas is terrible, and so that's just kind of how the holidays are. And so maybe this year you're pretty jazzed about only having to deal with it over a Zoom call. I don't know, but we just know that every year Christmas is often something easy to take for granted, and the days leading up to it, and certainly the time spent with family. And so I got to thinking about how this year was a gift, and it didn't have to be at all. I mean, the reality is, with so much of this pandemic being around loss and death and isolation and quarantining, I didn't have any expectation of what this Christmas could be. And so for me, I think I enjoyed it a bit more than I have others in the past. And so maybe you're like me and you look across the landscape and it's easy to think about all the things that you don't have this year or the opportunities you're not going to get. But potentially there's a chance to recognize and be grateful for what you have been given, because we recognize that time and family and life, none of those are guarantees. None of them are certain. In fact, they really are just good gifts that have been given to us, and they're on loan for a season of time. And so I know this is going to sound a little bit strange, but I did spend a significant amount of time on Christmas thinking about death. And I know that's always a bummer of a way to start something. I get it, but I was thinking a lot about death and how life is so fragile and how it's very temporary and how life is very short. And I think to some degree it's good to think about those things. And even as we end one year and look to begin another year, it's probably really good to be thinking about the fragility of life and how fast it goes. You know, the older I get, it seems as though the days are long and the years are short, you know? And when I was a kid, it felt like the days were long and the years were long, and it just took forever to get to any sort of milestone. But I think it's important that each one of us really take into consideration that, man, we weren't guaranteed this year and we're not guaranteed next year. And there are a lot of people that will not see next year in this life. And so what are some things we can learn from that? What are some ways we can engage that as a worthwhile discussion? How do we grow? How do we really sit down and reflect over the uncertainty of life and the gift that it is, and really avoid trying to live as though our days are limitless and our years are limitless? Man, when I was young, I really did believe I was immortal. I mean, the notion of getting old and even dying was just so foreign to me. And so as a teenager and even as a young adult, I lived pretty recklessly and carelessly a lot of the time because I just thought, well, I'm never going to die. And we all know how foolish that is. And the older I get, and the more funerals I do, and the more loss that I see, and as my body begins to adapt to its age, I see more now the importance of honoring the day I've been given, because tomorrow's a dream. It's a hope. It is not promised to me. And so I'd love to encourage all of us to really end this Advent season by beginning to think about what we're going to do going into the next season that we've been given. And so if you have a Bible, I would invite you to open up to Psalm chapter 90. Psalm chapter 90. Here at Redemption, we use the Christian Standard Bible, and so that'll be a translation and make it a little easier for you to follow along today. But Psalm chapter 90 is where we're going to camp out for our time, and we're not going to go very long today, but hopefully today will be very fruitful for you, and I do believe it can be extremely productive if we're willing to put the time and effort into what the Lord has for us. And so Psalm chapter 90, as you're making your way there, is a psalm that it's entitled a prayer of Moses, the man of God. And so this is the only song of Moses in the Psalms. Now, there are other songs that Moses has contributed. You have to go back to Exodus chapter 15. You have to go to Deuteronomy chapter 32. And you see this blessing of tribes that exists in Deuteronomy 33. But what we know is that this psalm is the only song that's recorded by Moses. And it is a beautiful song. It's powerful, gang. I'm telling you, it's extremely powerful. And what I want to do is, before we jump into it and learn from it, I want to be able to provide some historical context, because what's happening in the moment that this psalm is recorded by Moses is very powerful. And it's going to be really important for us to understand the incidents that are existing. And so all the way back in Numbers chapter 20, what we're seeing, what we're reading, is the context given to us for Moses to write this. And so we see the death of Miriam, which is Moses' sister. We see the sin of Moses in striking the rock in the wilderness, which ultimately keeps him from entering into the promised land. And there's the death of Aaron, Moses' brother. And so in this setting, you've got this intense situation unfolding that Moses is now finding himself really coming into the twilight of his life, and he's at the end of the desert wanderings. And if you go back and look through again Exodus, and into Numbers, you're going to find that God's people, when delivered from slavery, entered into a real season of disobedience. And so God caused them to wander in the desert, essentially moving in a giant circle for 40 years. And generation after generation died off, and God's hand of punishment was upon them. And Moses was leading these people and completely understood what was going on. And so this is a powerful reality. And now he's experiencing loss and great pain and hurt. And here's Moses now reflecting over his life, over all that he has seen and done. And now Moses begins to see his existence through the lens of death. And he's recognizing that life is short. He's recognizing that life is frail. And in order to truly live, you have to live with eternity in mind. And so in eternity, Moses is going to be with God forever. And with all of that in mind, Moses does something really profound. He asks God for one thing. He asks for wisdom. But the way that Moses asks for wisdom is really, really interesting. He asks God to teach him and to teach his people to number their days. So he doesn't ask to just understand his life or have a godly perspective over his life. Instead, he says, Lord, give me wisdom, give us wisdom, and teach us to number our days. And it's a powerful request. And what I want to do is spend some time understanding how he got to that point. And so I want us to look together on verses 9 through 12 of Psalm chapter 90, starting in verse 9. It says, "For all of our days ebb away under your wrath, and we end our years like a sigh. Our lives last 70 years, or if we're strong, 80 years. But even the best of them are struggle and sorrow. Indeed, they pass quickly and we fly away." Verse 11, "Who understands the power of your anger? Your wrath matches the fear that is due you." And this is what he says in verse 12. This is huge. He says, "Teach us to number our days carefully, so that we may develop wisdom in our hearts." Man, Moses, for a long time, he saw men and women, people that he cared about, that he led, dying all around him. He lived among funerals and was overwhelmed at the terrible results of God's divine displeasure. And ultimately, he felt that none could measure the might of God's wrath. And so it's with this poetic power that Moses, he compared the eternal nature of the holy God with the frail, temporary nature of sinful man. Did you catch that? That Moses is in awe of the eternal nature of how holy God is and how frail and temporary the sinful nature of man is. That God stands forever, but long days have passed away, and we finish our years like a sigh. Man, Moses described the short and often frail sense of his life. That's what he felt regularly. I know I feel that regularly. Maybe you do too. And so he says to God in verse 12, he says, "Teach us to number our days." And so when Moses considered the frail nature of humanity and the righteous judgment of God, it made him ask God for wisdom to understand the shortness of life. He knows life is short, but he wants to really understand that reality. And so when he says teach us, what he means is he wants wisdom, that he wants to learn. Because he intuitively understands that that type of wisdom isn't automatic. Look, the reality is most people live with little awareness that life is short. We say that, oh, life is short. But very few people actually live with an awareness of that. Therefore, our days should be numbered. And look, if you're young, man, when I was young, we often think our days have no number. And so we give little thought to what lies beyond this life. I love what one commentator says. He says, "To live with dying thoughts is the way to die with living comforts." Man, learning to number our days will give us a heart of wisdom. And it's not only wisdom for your mind, but it's truly wisdom that is for your heart. And so when Moses asked, he wasn't looking for wisdom to process his life. He was looking for peace. Do you ever look back over your life and just long for peace? I mean, overall, let me ask you, if as you consider all that Moses was thinking about and processing and the circumstances and the loss and the challenge that he had now found himself in, he was longing for something greater to give his life peace and meaning. And I want to live like that. So I want to ask you, are you interested in living like that? Are you interested in living in such a way that you take into consideration the frailty and the shortness and the uncertainty of your life? I mean, do you desire to live out the remainder of your days knowing that they are numbered and thus living for eternity, becoming fully acquainted with God? And as a result, you're at peace. I think the only way to live at peace is longing to die with peace. I mean, how much time do you spend thinking about the manner in which you might die? I mean, we sit around talking about, like, if you could pick the way that you die, you know. I just want to die with peace. I want to die knowing that every day I could have died. And I want to be at peace every night when my head hits the pillow. I think the only way to live at peace is longing to die with peace, knowing that eternity isn't simply about forever. It's about living with God in His favor and love forever. And so, assuming that maybe you're like me and that you want to live this way, the question is, how do we accomplish learning how to number our days? Like, how do we actually do that? Because I think it's easy to start thinking that way. Like, I want to live each day as though it could be my last. Well, that's a great statement, and it sounds very poetic, but what are we actually doing to accomplish that? Well, I think you have to learn from Moses here. I think this is the beauty of Psalm 90. We have to be intentional with our lives, our everydays. And it has to be more than just experiences. It has to be more than just making a bucket list. It has to be more than simply enjoying your family and your career and being concerned about leaving a legacy. I think it has to be about seeing the very day of life that you have been given as an opportunity to serve God and His kingdom. And not everything has to be big or a grand gesture, but every day there needs to be an opportunity in front of us that we capture and get a hold of and go, man, today, yeah, I did all these things, or I didn't do all of these things. But I did serve the Lord, and I did serve His kingdom. And how do we get to that place? Well, I think we've got to be willing to ask for the wisdom that is necessary. I think we've got to humble ourselves. I think we have to condition our hearts and our minds to see the frailty of life and the certainty of death. And I think we have to leverage the moments that we've been given and learn from them and allow them to reorient our hearts and our minds. It's a full reorientation of ourselves. And as often as we have to in order to accomplish this level of intentional living. I mean, really, take this year, for example. Have you stopped to think about what you have learned from this year? I mean, we all know this year has been garbage. Yeah, duh. But it's been more than that too, right? I mean, have you stopped to think about what you've learned? Have you stopped and thought about what it's taught you about who you are as a person? What it's revealed in you? What this year has revealed in others? Maybe our society and our culture. Perhaps you've questioned the things that you value most, and you've really begun to question your schedule. Maybe it's brought the worst out in you. Perhaps it's brought your insecurities to the forefront of your life? Have you remotely considered what this year has afforded you in terms of some life lessons? Because if you have, on any level, you wouldn't be alone. What's been really fascinating is the Pew Research Group. They did, at the height of the first wave of the pandemic in our country, they did some incredible polling. They did some research, and they surveyed a number of Americans. 35% of those they surveyed said they believe that this virus, this season, is a lesson being sent by God. 35%. 37% did not believe that God was trying to teach some sort of lesson to humanity as a result of this pandemic. 13% said they don't believe in God, therefore there's nothing to remotely learn. But this is really fascinating. Of all the people that were surveyed, 86% said yes, they believe there is some sort of lesson for humankind to learn from the coronavirus outbreak. Now, whether it came from God or not from God, they were uncertain. But 86% believed there was something to be learned. And only 13% said no, they don't believe there's a lesson for humankind to learn. It's just an unfortunate situation. But overwhelmingly, Americans believe there's a lesson to be learned here. That's incredible. 86%. Where do you fall? Are you in that 86% that there are some lessons to be learned here? For you, for the people around you, for us as a country, as a culture, as a society? Or are you in the 13% that says, nah, it just is what it is? Well, I'm in the 86% camp. I think there are lessons to be learned here. Question is, what is the primary lesson? Well, I think that's the beauty of the individualized nature of what we've been going through. I've often said that while we are all in the same storm, we're not in the same boat. Not all of us are experiencing this pandemic the same way. So, for me, I think the primary lesson that I've learned is that life is frail and short, that death is real and it's coming for me, and that eternity matters and it's forever. So I want the Lord to teach me to number my days. I want the Lord to teach me, through wisdom, how to live with an extreme sense of intentionality. That's one of the primary lessons that I think this season has afforded me. And that's just me being very vulnerable with you. What has it taught you? Well, maybe you've not spent enough time reflecting or asking the right questions. Maybe the lessons it's taught you are too hard to even accept. Well, if you want the same, maybe you want to live intentionally and you want the Lord to teach you to number your days, I think it'd be good to begin that process together. I want to invite you to take some time to self-reflect. I want you to write down with pen and paper what you're learning, what you've learned, what you want to change, what you'd like to see be different. I don't want you just to sit and watch your screen waiting for this to be over so you can get back to whatever your day has for you. I want you to begin the work today because I'm beginning the work, and I want us to go together in learning how to have the Lord teach us how to number our days. Church, I really believe to live with dying thoughts is the way to die with living comforts. Your life will one day be over. And if you live with that in mind every single day, then you will have the wisdom you need to live for the Lord And your heart will have peace knowing that when you die, you will truly live. So I'm going to give you a few questions that are not meant to be the end all or be all, but rather just a guide to get you started. I want to invite you to take as much time as you need. And I'm not going to be back on the screen after this. And so if you want to hit the pause button or take a screenshot or whatever you need to do, this is your chance. And so I know you've probably got a lot of things to do today, but none of them will be as important as this. Do you desire that the Lord would teach you to number your days? That's not only the first question, that's really the only question that matters. Do you desire that the Lord would teach you to number your days? And if you desire it, how far are you willing to go? How far are you willing to go so that the Lord might teach you? What have been some obstacles that have kept you from living each and every day for God and for His kingdom? Maybe another way to phrase that is, what's been in your way? What's been stopping you? What's been preventing you from being all in for serving the Lord in His kingdom? What has 2020 revealed in you? What is something you've learned about yourself that you're surprised by, saddened by? What has it revealed about the very nature of who you are as a person? What's one thing that you're committed to changing going into this next year so that you might live more intentionally with the days that you've been given? It's one thing you're committed to changing. These are the questions, gang. I want to urge you to end this year as big as you can and grab a hold of this opportunity. Be like Moses, who is truly God's man, who before he died on that mountainside, he begged the Lord to give him wisdom for his mind and his heart so that he might learn to number his days. Don't think of your life in years. Think of your life in days. Because today might be your last. What wisdom do you need to make it count? Church, this is a worthwhile exercise for each one of us. It's going to put things in perspective. It's going to begin a journey for each one of us. And so I pray that the Lord will meet you in the middle of it, and that you will leave this year better than when you started it. I love you. I'm praying for you, and I can't wait to hear what the Lord does. See you next year. See you, bye.